Welcome to the AAE Podcast, the new podcast for European actuaries designed to deliver in-depth insights on the latest trends and essential updates within the insurance industry.
Welcome, André. Welcome, Michael. This is the third episode of the AAE Podcast. And this one is going to be very interesting because it's about consumers. It's about how they get their information on pensions, which might be a bit boring, but is very interesting for us. My name is Jeroen van den Bosch, and I'm hosting this podcast about pension tracking systems or pension tracking services. I'm a member of the AAE, which is the Actuarial Association of Europe, and we're going to talk about pension tracking systems, how they evolve, and how Europe is involved with this subject. But first of all, André, could you elaborate a bit on your role in this podcast, but also in the work on pension tracking systems?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be here with the two of you. I'm a German pension actuary. André Geilenkothen is my name. I'm leading a pension fund in Germany and I'm working as a consultant for employers who provide pensions to their employees. I was invited to participate for the German actuarial practice in the AAE working group on pension tracking services, and it's about collecting knowledge, best practices, expertise around pension tracking, enhancing it, improving it, promoting this, and providing guidance, counsel to national or supranational authorities on that.
Thank you. Michael, can you elaborate on your work? And maybe you can tell something about why this is so important, this work that we, but also some other actuaries and non-actuaries are doing on this subject.
Yeah, thank you, Jeroen, for having me on this podcast. Because I'm not an actuary, I'm Michael Visser. I'm involved in the European Tracking Service on Pensions, the ETS project, on behalf of the Stichting Pensioenregister. It's the Dutch national tracking pension system. I'm really excited about pensions, so this is one of the projects I will do in life. So working on later and on the good pensions for people, because you're asking why this is so important. I think pensions is something people don't really like to think about, but it is important. And I think what we are doing with pension tracking is giving and providing people overview, insights, just to get them on track with their pension. So we do that on a national level, but also on a European level with the European Tracking Service. So I think I'm going to tell something about that later on in this podcast.
Okay. Thank you very much. And it's not only because we are very interested in this subject, but it's also because it's on the agenda of the European Commission and also on the agenda of EIOPA, the supervisor of pensions, insurance, banking, etc. So this is a very important subject that will move slowly forward, but it is moving forward for the next 2 decades to evolve. And André, you talked about your participation in the AAE working group on pension tracking services. Could you tell a bit more about the members of this working group, what kind of work they are doing, and how this work involves the things that we are going to talk about today?
Yeah, so we are a group of actuaries from different countries in Europe. I think from 6 countries: Belgium, Denmark, Bulgaria, the Netherlands, Germany, Slovakia. I hope I didn't miss anyone, and if yes, then please excuse me. We are collecting those information, that best practice on pension tracking, seeing what are the experiences so far. Some countries are farther ahead, have established that for maybe a couple of years, like the Netherlands, like Denmark, like Belgium, and others just have introduced it recently, like Germany, or are on have some parts. There is a need. As Michael said, I think we all need information to make a good financial planning for retirement. We need the right information, finding also the important information in the sea of information, so the important bits and pieces, and then plan accordingly. That is what we are trying to achieve in the working group, finding the best practices, enhancing it, providing it to interested parties, hopefully like the people listening to us now, also gathering information from other parties, and so we came in contact with Michael and the ETS project.
Yeah, we'll elaborate on that further on. And maybe it's good for the listeners to know, what is a PTS? What is a pension tracking service? In my opinion, a pension tracking service is a digital way that people in a country like the countries that you mentioned, André, where they can get their information and where they can collect the information of different pension providers and put this all together and have a clear picture on what are my pensions, what are my benefits at the retirement age, and maybe what are the benefits when I decease and my partner gets a pension, that kind of information. And that's about overview and insight. But there's a third part of it as well, which is like taking action when the pension is not sufficient enough. Michael, you know a bit about the pension tracking service around Europe. What I reckoned is that there are quite some differences between the different countries. Could you elaborate a bit on that, on what you see in Europe, for example, for one or two examples to elaborate a bit on the differences between the different countries on pension tracking services?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences between the countries in the pension systems, but also in the maturity of the national tracking systems, if they have that one, because about 10, 11 countries have a kind of a pension tracking system in place, but a lot of countries within the EU don't have one yet. If you see, for example, the Netherlands, because maybe it's nice to tell, Jeroen, I know you a little bit from the early ages when starting the Dutch tracking system. I think it's about 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah.
When I was a student and my professor asked me to do some research, feasibility research on a Dutch tracking system, then nobody knows about it. We had about 1,000 pension providers in the Netherlands, all communicating differently. He asked, can we don't do that by internet? Okay, so we made a report and the pension fund, the board members say, okay, but it's way too complicated, IT, privacy issues. And we as a student thought, okay, but we did good research. Then 5 years later, it was in the law. And since 2011, there is a Dutch tracking system and it's a coverage of about 99% of the people who have pension rights. They can find it and see just the things you just mentioned, Jeroen. But we have the first pillars covered, so the Dutch state pension and the second pillar, the complementary pensions, a working place pension, but not yet the third pillar. So other countries who have in place all three pillars, for example.
Can you elaborate on the three pillars? Because maybe not everyone understands what the three pillars are.
It's very good that you asked that. That's the personal pension, so life insurance, what you save for yourself, not by your employer. That's most of the time is the personal pension. And some countries give the insights also and information on that pillar. So there is a difference. But also when you talk about the questions people have is, do I have a pension? When do I get my pension? But also for survivor's pension, you ask. It's good to know what you have. And then the next one is, okay, take action. And some of the pension tracking system, they also help people with scenario planning. But other ones say, okay, no, we just provide information pension provider have, but we have a total insight. And others say, okay, we do a little bit more. So you see differences on that within the European countries and the national tracking systems.
Yeah. So a lot of differences between the different countries. So that shall be a challenge to get those things together. But we'll take that up in a few minutes. André, I want to ask a little bit about the German system and just to elaborate a bit on what are the challenges for a German pension tracking system to get all the information together, because I know you have something like Pensionskassen, you have Rentenversicherungen, all kinds of pensions, Pensionsfonds, and so how do you deal with that to get the information together?
Germany is thinking about pension tracking also for a couple of years, also maybe 20 years back. This really picked up speed 7-8 years ago. So I came in contact with that also when the government asked for a feasibility study on what needs to be done. And I had the privilege to work on that feasibility study together with a lot of colleagues. And we provided some basic research material. And based on that, something was established in 2020-21. And now it's also alive. Compared to what Michael said, yes, Germany has aims to go across all three pillars. So it's the state pension scheme, it's the occupational pension schemes from the employers and also the private pensions involved. But Germany is a large country and sometimes you also tend to have a complicated landscape sometimes and have a lot of means of providing pensions. So we have Pensionskassen, Pensionsfonds, so IOPs, so institutions of occupational pensions that are regulated, but we also have direct pension promises by employers, support funds, and especially employer promises. There are thousands of those out there. So a lot of companies, obviously, that is a challenge to collect all these data in a meaningful way and bring all those different things together so that it's kind of a comparable thing, that is something that can be used by the individual. Obviously, there is always something where you need to make also some compromises between detail and transparency, explainability, etc. So those were the challenges we were confronted with.
Yeah, and it's a good example of what Michael also pointed out. The Dutch system is in place as of 2011. The German system is just a few years now, but it's a long way to get to a system that you really say, well, this is overview and insight and maybe some action to add on. So it's a process that's going slowly, but it's going ahead. But you wanted to tell something about it.
Yeah. It's it's a living project. So I think in the early years, before we started in 2018, 2019, with really taking action, there were considerations and always aiming, well, how could the perfect product look like? And that basically bogs you down, that slows you down. So you need to start with a minimal viable product that in the beginning maybe has not all the features that would be nice to have or would be good and worthwhile. You need to start with the most important things and then add on. And also you need to test something on the way, I think. We see that technology is evolving so fast. So that is also the thing. When Germany started, it was very clear that we did not want to use paperwork with that. We call it digitale Rentenübersicht, so digital pension information. It's an online portal and you have the information as in digital form. And now we need to see how that evolves and where we need to evaluate, reevaluate, change slightly and improve constantly.
Okay, thank you.
It's a step-by-step approach, yeah?
Yeah.
So it's involving,
Exactly, and that's the comparability between all the developments of the different pension tracking systems that are in Europe. And some are in a very early stage and the others are more mature. But the thing is that we can learn from each other. And that's a good angle to go to the work of the working group on pension tracking systems from the AAE, where André and me are both participating in. The working group is just trying to get together all these information, all the developments and learn from each other, but also to be able to let other countries to help them with evolving their own pension tracking system, whether it's a very complicated pension tracking system or a very, quite an easy, understandable pension tracking system. It doesn't make any difference, but we as actuaries are trying to at least get the information together, learn from each other and help other countries to evolve. But also we will try to have the actuarial aspects in that. And we'll come back to that later on, because there is going to be a discussion paper of the Actuarial Association of Europe provided by the Working Group on Pension Tracking Systems, and we'll go to the results a bit later on. But I just want to point out now the connection between Michael giving the information from ETS with the working group. How did this start?
In fact, it started with you, Jeroen, because I know you were chairman of the working group and you told me about the work you already did in the past in several reports. And then when I'm now just on board with the ETS project for about 2 years, and then I thought, okay, but we have a lot of expertise internally from different angles. But I thought, okay, but actuarial insight from an independent authority like the AAE, it's very useful for us also to learn how you see things, and especially when it comes to figures, counting up figures. Can you do that? Gross, net? So maybe we can elaborate on that. So I thought, okay, maybe we can ask you to do a small feasibility study for us, as I can say, maybe sharpening our level of ambition, because we have also in this project, it's a step-by-step approach by connecting different countries. And I will tell a little bit who are in the project now, but maybe later on we like to connect more and more countries. So I thought, okay, maybe we can help each other, and can you help us with information from actuarial point of view, your expertise.
And within ETS, who are involved? Because there are different countries involved, but who are the people who are involved in this project?
The ETS is an association with various members. So there are national tracking services on board. So it's the Sigedis from Belgium, Mijn in Sweden, the Dutch pension register. It's mijnpensioenoverzicht.nl, but also pension providers and institutions like APG and PGGM from Netherlands, Union Retraite from France, the Verzorgungsanstalt des Bundes und der Länder, VBL in Germany.
A lot of languages.
Pronounce it well, André?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah, okay. And also associations like the European Association of Paritarian Institutions, the AAIP. And new members are just on board. It's the Deutsche Renteversicherung und Regos. It's from Croatian institution. So we're connecting more and more countries. So those are the members. Yeah. But in fact, you do it especially for the mobile workers, the mobile working citizens within Europe. So that's our main target group. But it's important that you have more and more countries on board and the national tracking system.
And Michael, it's a variety of countries, of providers. And is it intended to grow for the next years, or?
Yeah, that's our ambition to tell about the project, to show that it is live already, because in fact Belgium and France are really technically connected. So people now living in France, Belgium, or have worked in France or Belgium and have pension rights, they can log in on findyourpension.eu and then see their PDF from their insights of their pension accrual or their rights, and a lot of more information, because it's not only that you connect the dots between the tracking systems within the European countries, but also provides a lot of background information on the pension systems within the different countries. Help people, the personas as we call it, the younger one, the older ones, help them on their way to their pension.
Yeah, and there is I think a comparison to make with the work of the working group, André. Can you elaborate a bit on what the steps were that, as I told, there is going to be a discussion paper. It will be published within a few weeks, and probably together with the publishing of this podcast. But could you elaborate a bit on the work, on the process that we in the working group had towards the end of publishing a discussion paper?
Yeah, sure. We aimed for and actually did this so that we each reported on our respective countries' PTS or bits and pieces, but work in the direction of a PTS. So sharing that information with the others in the group, and first of all, collecting those information, and then finding the common pieces, but also the differences. Those differences, we talked about that already. They have sometimes a very good reason from the system they stem from. And then because some country, a larger weight maybe on purely information, others on information and going forward on providing counsel on top of the information, etc. So collected those information, then brought it also in a structure, let's say, make it easy to compare, and then see what we can learn from that, as you already mentioned, and give some best practices for other countries that they can work on, and also identifying what are the challenges of going ahead. For example, is there some common output in the PDF files? For example, we in Germany only have online information, don't create a combined PDF. These are things that need to be taken into account when going further.
So it's quite a challenge to get all the information together, because there are a lot of difference between the different countries, and you need to do more than focus alone on the work of the pension tracking systems, because you need the country information about how the pension system works in your country, because it's quite diverse throughout Europe how these pension systems work, and that makes it even more complicated to get all the pieces together to have one overview, for example, for people who work abroad, and to manage their information. We touched upon the discussion paper, and I want to move forward with that part, the discussion paper that's going to come out, and we are going to release a little bit on the results from this paper. And there are some key messages, and I just want to touch upon the communication, the participant part with you, Michael, for the more actuarial part with you, André, because What we've seen as a general result is that PTS vary significantly in scope, in maturity. We talked about that, about data standards. We didn't talk really on that, but André mentioned some things about it, but also on projection methodologies and communication practices. And that point of communication practices I want to touch upon with you, Michael. Can you elaborate a bit on what are the findings on communication, on how to deal with the information and how it will help ETS to move forward?
Yeah, maybe first of all, this is the moment also to thank you for all your work and expertise in the report. I was lucky to be at some of your work group meetings and already had some preliminary findings. So I didn't read the final report because it's coming out almost. So I think when you talk about communication, it's important that your working group find out that every country communicate at a different level on different pillars, sometimes aggregated, sometimes very more in detailed, some PDFs contains maybe 2-3 pages, others 20 pages. The difference in languages, for example, maybe that's one. In France, most of the communication is in French. Not everybody can read and understand that. But on the other hand, people lived in France, they probably do. But when you're thinking about the mobile workers or cross-border workers, when they have worked for a couple of years in France or in Germany and they think, okay, I had some years there, let's check out, do I have a pension? Okay, you can connect by findyourpension.eu. You find out you have a pension, and then in this phase of the project, because we are now in the rollout phase, you can find your PDF. But then you have different kind of PDFs, different languages, where the one is in gross amounts and the other sometimes in net amounts.
And just to ask a little question in between, a PDF is some kind of a document that's produced by the pension tracking system. It's not an official pension document, but it's generated by the pension tracking system.
Yeah. So ETS connects the national systems and also their data and documents. It's purely the document they provided. You can ask by connecting. So you have to authenticate and etc. But then you get that one. And the goal is also that you can find your national tracking service to ask more details or to see more online actual information or to go to your pension provider that you maybe not know anymore after 10, 20 years. So that's one of the reasons to activate people and to find their information. But your report also shows that there are different kind of aspects to take into account. For example, taxation. So the gross and net thing is something people maybe have to take into account. When you retire in another country, there are different rules. And how do you deal with that? So these are things we also can take into account into the project for the next years, how to deal with that and to better communicate on the issues you mentioned there.
Yeah. And communicating about these issues. It's also about how did you start with your pension tracking system? Because what I know, for example, the difference between Belgium and the Netherlands is that in Belgium, there was a need of getting more information on pensions to have better policy in the government. But they found out that this information could help very well to inform citizens as well. Whereas in the Netherlands, it was provided by law. And the incentive was to provide better information to the citizens. So the starting points of the different countries is different as well.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what I'll do is now to move to the more actuarial aspects, because what we see in this discussion paper is that there is a diversity of approaches, and that creates a lot of challenges for cross-country consolidation, especially when you look at comparability of the pensions. Michael pointed out the taxation, for example, the completeness of the information, whereas what we know is that, for example, in Germany, like 60% of the people is connected to the pension tracking system. In the Netherlands, Michael pointed out 99% of the people. So the completeness is a thing to, not to worry about, but as a challenge to deal with. But also when you look at assumptions and calculation methods. And could you elaborate a bit on that, André? Because those are the more actuarial aspects.
One thing before that is also consistency. You have some reporting standards or requirements by law, by European law, by national law. Obviously, pension tracking service must take that into account. It would be a nightmare if pension information would be not consistent across different means of communication. But then you need, if you have different standards, you also need to take into account how can I compare these values to make this very easy to understand. For example, if you take a pension that is really an annuity, so a lifelong pension that is paid monthly, that is something different than a lump sum payment, so a large chunk of money that you maybe get at retirement. And we need to make this understandable for a user, for a citizen to work with this information. Probably each person can very good relate to a monthly pension amount, because it's like we all see it on our accounts. We get our monthly salary and we know what we can do with this salary, what we need for buying food, paying our rent and whatever. So if you have a monthly amount, that is probably quite easy to understand. But then if you have a lump sum, you need also some idea on how to transform that into an annuity. And you must make sure that it does not overpromise something, that you calculate in a way that some amount comes out that is too high, but also not too cautious. It must be something that is kind of a best estimate. And there, I think we as actuaries can give some insights there how to best do this. Other thing is, for example, inflation. So a payment in 20 years' time, if you have it in nominal values, you must also take into account that the value of money changes over that period of time, depending on how the promise is maybe escalated.
And there are, for example, quite some difference between the different countries on, for example, assumptions. I know from the Netherlands we have some assumptions on how to deal with the calculation from a lump sum to an annuity, because for bonds and for other kinds of investments, you have different kind of interest rates that you need to use for that. But they can differ from the assumptions that are used in another country. But there are also, what I've seen is that there are also differences between European calculation rules. Can you tell a bit on that? Because we are now talking on pensions, which is like the IORP directive, the Institution of Occupational Retirement Pensions directive, the European directive, but there are more directives and more calculation rules.
Yeah, so you need, first of all, on a national level, but later on also on a European level, to define what would be a usable set of assumptions. For example, we in Germany have in those prognosis scenarios, we go to a midpoint scenario. So not a most aggressive or most cautious one, but a midpoint scenario. And that needs to be defined by a regulator or by an authority, but we as actuaries can provide insights or give hints how that could be probably derived.
So there are a lot of things that we, at least as actuaries, see right now, and those conclusions are in our discussion paper, how to move forward, because there are differences in calculation methods throughout the countries, but also throughout the different kind of pension benefits. When you look at investment products, or when you look at insurance products or on pensions products, they differ. That's not that we're saying that they should be the same, but we should at least look at the calculation methods, because what we want to do is to make sure that people get the right information to make their decisions and probably to take action. Trying to close a bit the podcast right now, but not really, is, Michael, how should ETS move forward on this subject? We have provided now a discussion paper with a lot of information, and I'll ask André later on what the working group of on pension tracking service will do in the future. But what should ETS take up right now as a result of this report?
These insights André is telling about are very important. I think the actuarial insights, it's also about the risks behind the figures, maybe, if I can translate it. So when people, the mobile workers, about 10 million in Europe, who are living in another country, and every year they're moving more and more countries, that they a little bit understand by a disclaimer, or that they know what the figures mean. And it's always a balancing between understandability, correctness. So that's also your profession, I think. But that's a question that you have to look, okay, but the amounts, what are they tell the people get the pension? And you talked about the lump sum and the annuity difference. Now in the Netherlands, it's almost everything is annuity, because the law where people can take up a lump sum of 10% at the max is still not yet through Parliament. requirement, but maybe in the future it will be. So then you have different calculation methods and also communication issues. So I think I will spread the report internally within ETS and to the colleagues over there to carefully read it and to make use of it. Because in the beginning you already told Jeroen that it's also learning from each other. So I'm learning every day about different system, countries, and also a little bit about the actuarial stuff. Yeah. So I really like it. Yeah,
very good.
So I think we can make use of your insights, and hopefully also in the near future, maybe you research further on some issues. We're glad to keep in contact and stay in touch.
Yeah, we'll probably do. No, we will do that. André, what will be the next steps of the working group on pension tracking services?
We would like to connect to more countries in Europe, and hopefully this podcast helps. So if you are a pension actuary in some country in Europe and are interested in this, give us a shout. You can probably leave a comment in the comment section. We will connect to you. We want to broaden our scope. We want to get in contact with more pension tracking means in Europe, share experiences, and then we want to get in contact also with the European Commission or with the directorates and the IOPA and OECD to also provide them with our insights, our guidance as actuaries, what we think is useful and helpful for users.
Yeah, thank you. And Michael, maybe as a last statement from your side, when will we hear something from ETS? What will be the next step of ETS?
As I told, it's a step-by-step approach, and now more and more countries are connected or willing to connect. So I told you Croatia, Germany. So we're glad that countries are also connected to the ETS association, but also interest from Poland and other countries. So the same as André, I think if people like to get in touch, you can do it by LinkedIn or email. You can find us by findyourpension.eu. There's also information for policymakers or pension providers who likes to connect or like to know more. But for the people, I think, more and more countries connecting also involves more and more mobile workers who can benefit of it. So in the next year, you will see that the platform is also evolving. We talked about that earlier. So we're now in the starting phase of rollout. It's live. So if you are a mobile worker, you can check
it out.
For now, it's Belgium and France, but probably in the next years, it's the Netherlands, Germany, etc. So
we can find this information on
www.findyourpension.eu. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the Find Your Pension. It helps people who work or have worked in different European countries and find information on their pension. So that's the thing, that people can find their pension and then take action.
Yeah.
As you told us, activate, find, inform, and activate.
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you, André, for being in this podcast. It was really nice to talk about this subject. Thank you all for listening. And do you want to know more about the work of the AAE Working Group on Pension Tracking Systems? Then go to the website of the AAE, which is www.actuary.eu, or leave a message with this podcast. So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see or hear you at our next podcast, the fourth one, which will be provided the coming months.
This was the AAE Podcast. See you soon.